So we're going to break a pallet today. Now there's loads of different ways of doing it, and it will also depend on the sort of pallet that you're breaking. Some are much easier to break than others, but if you don't have many tools you can use this crowbar. You can see I've broken the teeth off of that, so I've used that a lot. Initially that's what we first used, and one of those. That's all you really need. It's very hard to do it that way, so when you have to do more than one of these is the way forward. It's a recip saw or a saber saw, and you can see here it's got a pallet blade on. A pallet blade is sort of a combination between a wood blade and a metal blade, which works very well. It's battery operated, this one, and that means that the cable doesn't get in the way, which is for me extremely handy. Decent hammer, flat bar or a prybar, good set of pliers, and one of those, which is a punch for knocking out the nails, the leftover nails. And that's all we need. Let's get started. I'm going to kick off with these two, prybar and the hammer. So some people just say that they can use the recip saw and chop through them in 3 seconds flat. That's actually not been my experience at all. That depends. If there's an old pallet that there's big gaps between, then it's easy. But when they're fairly new, like this one is, and they've been nailed in with threaded nails, it's very hard to do that, and it takes a long time. So what I find works is I loosen it up a bit with the prybar just to get a gap. So now, oops, we got a bit of a gap and a splinter in the wood. That's the other thing. The aim of the game is to try and break as little of the wood as possible, but as you're going to find out, it's trickier than it looks. With the recip saw, it bounces around like mad unless you hold it using this guard right up against it. And what will happen is, see, now you can see why I needed to make the gap. You have to try and get the blade in there a bit. So now it's sitting in there beautifully. If you do it like this, it's going to bounce like mad, your blade's going to bend, and yeah, you could be in for an interesting time of it. So shove it right into the gap we've made, and then we get started. Broken the pallet. You can see that what I did there is I kept the nails in and just pried them apart, because what will happen there is it's not going to break the wood up, and it's much easier to get these out now. You can cut through them, but then you have to go to town with this, which is also quite tedious. So for this one we did that. These blocks, you could maybe use them. I used to use them, but then as you can see where we cut with the recip saw, the nail ends are still in there, so if you throw a drill bit in there or try and saw it, there's a good chance you're going to hit that. So I don't bother. That's the end of that. And the reason I want to keep the wood as much as possible is because obviously we make home decor out of it, so we want to use as much as we can, and the whole point is we're recycling, so we don't want to throw away. And I don't want nail ends. This is very important, because if I throw it through the planer blades are very expensive. If those go through in any way, even a tiny bit, just screws the blade up completely. As you can see, the threaded nail I'm talking about, they're very hectic to get out. They use that obviously to keep the pallets as long as possible, which is great for them. Not so great if you want to break them apart. So let's start taking the nails out. Oh, and filling holes, use some wood filler, makes it look a lot nicer. So these are the 3 bits of wood that we used the recip saw on. So they obviously have the nails still in them. See where we cut through? These are the dangerous ones. You don't really see them, and if you put them through a planer or do anything like that, it's going to screw up your machine. So we take them out, use the pin punch, and this is why I didn't want to do so many of these, because it's quite tedious. Knock them out and pull the pin punch out and repeat for every single nail that you've got. So don't let anyone tell you that breaking pallets is easy and can be done in 5 minutes. That only applies if you're doing something very rustic and very rough-shodden, let's call it. We don't want to do that. So to get the wood prepared to make a decent product or whatever you want to make for your house, you have to put a lot of effort and time into it. So then I've been collecting the nails. You can dispose of them responsibly, or you can, if you want to, reuse some of them. The ones that I didn't cut the ends off, you could reuse again. So I think to bear in mind when you're collecting pallets is look for a brand that says HT. HT on the side. Not all pallets have it, some do. It means heat treated, which basically means it hasn't got any bad chemicals in it, so it's safe to use. If you see anything that says MB, there's a brand that says MB, lots of pallets in South Africa are like that, unfortunately. It's methyl bromide, it's chemical, you don't want it. You don't want it for anything, you don't want to use it for gardening, nothing. You don't want to touch it. In parts of the world it's been banned, so yeah, leave that alone, and then use common sense. If there's no brand, just have a look. Is there any oil spills on it or anything like that? Don't take it. So these blocks that I cut away, you can use them for firewood really. I mean, people like doing braais here, barbecues, whatever you call it in the rest of the world.